Chapter 15 Coast Part 1. A stack of bulbous green shapes reflected the light from Twilight's horn as she gazed around the station in awe. They formed a pillar in the center of the station, like tree sap that had oozed from the ceiling and hardened to become amber. The base of the column filled the space between the station's two platforms, wide enough for 3 tracks. With her swords drawn, Twilight cautiously stepped forward. Dust plumed with each fall of her hooves. A pair of rats scurrying into a corner cast amplified shadows on the wall. The scritching sound of tiny teeth emanated from below the edge of the platform.
What is this?
Rainbow asked, somewhere behind her. Seeing nothing threatening, Twilight sheathed her swords and approached the pillar. She inspected one of the round, bulbous pods. Its reflective surface caught the light of her horn, showing nothing but her own distorted face. She dimmed her horn, and another face replaced hers. She saw an inverted pony inside the pod, and recoiled in surprise. "What is it, Twilight?" Applejack asked, stepping up beside her.
There are ponies in these,
Twilight murmured. She placed her hoof against the pod, and the surface gave, the material flexible and springy. "What?" Applejack said, jostling her to get a better look.
There's some up here, too,
Rainbow said from where she hovered next to the pod higher on the pillar.
We have to get them out. Wait, we don't!
Twilight shouted as she looked up. Rainbow had already cut a gash into the base of the pod above her. She sidestepped a trickling stream of green goo oozing out of the pod. A rancid, rotten smell filled her nostrils. A mass slumped out of the breach in the pod, sliding down the pillar until it landed beside Twilight. Through the transparent slime, she saw an emaciated body. She reached out a hoof and pushed it through the slime to touch its neck. There was no pulse.
We don't know what these are,
she finished.
Is she dead?
Rainbow asked. Twilight nodded, flicking the slime off her hoof. She scrunched up her nose at the smell and took a step back. "Judging by the smell, she's been dead for a few hours at least," Applejack said as she brushed a bit of slime that had splattered her off her armor's chest piece.
This place is full of death,
Fluttershy said.
I can feel it.
The slime slowly oozed off the body, revealing the mayor's face with clarity. Twilight's eyes widened. It was the same mayor as the one in the tower, the one Rainbow had killed.
That can't be right,
she muttered, pushing away more of the slime with her magic. The face perfectly matched her memory of Daisy. Rainbow landed beside the body. She stared at it in shock.
No way, that's not right. She's ash now.
She stamped her hoof.
This isn't possible. Who is she?
Rarity asked, stepping up to get a better look.
Daisy,
Rainbow murmured.
She's a pony we saw in the tower,
Twilight explained.
You should come see this, Twilight,
Pinky said, peering around the edge of the massive pods with interest. Twilight stepped over. From this angle, she saw a hole through the pillar. The pods formed an arch over where the tracks once were. In both directions, rubble completely blocked the tramway tunnel, isolating the station. A trickle of water oozed out from one of the tunnels and ran beneath the arch. A cluster of rats scurried away from a pod leaking a thin trickle of slime. They had almost gnawed through the material.
They must smell food,
Twilight said, shaking her head sadly. Pinky wrapped a foreleg around her neck and directed her gaze higher, at the apex of the arch. Twilight crooked a brow.
What is it?
She asked.
What isn't it?
Pinky replied.
Pinky, this isn't the time for your...
Twilight started to say, but as she looked closer, she noticed an odd cavity where a large pod could fit. Around the edges of the cavity, the green substance looked stretched, like caramel that had been pulled apart.
Oh. Some of them are still alive!
Fluttershy cried out, drawing Twilight's attention. The druid's eyes were glowing.
Which ones?
Rainbow quickly asked, taking flight again.
I can't tell. They're all buried behind the dead,
Fluttershy said, quivering. Twilight sucked air through a cloth she had put over her mouth as a makeshift mask while she stacked slime-covered bodies in one of the platform's corners, beside the twisted remains of what was once a bench. One more, Twilight, Applejack said, indicating a corpse on the floor that Rainbow had just cut free. A few hoofspans away, Fluttershy tended to another body. The stallion wasn't breathing, but Fluttershy believed he was still alive. Twilight reached out and dragged the corpse across the floor, using a well-built trail of slime until it was close enough that she could lift it into the air. She froze as its face passed by.
Him,
she thought. It was the laughing pony at the head of the table. She jerked the corpse in shock, and it slammed into the wall as her levitation collapsed.
This isn't physically possible,
she said, staring at the corpse. It lay in the corner between the wall and the floor, its neck twisted at a grotesque angle. Twilight, you okay? Applejack shouted. She sounded muffled and far away. Twilight stepped closer to the body and inspected it. It was, without a doubt, the same pony she had seen at the head of the table in the tower. A chill ran down her spine.
How?
She murmured.
This cannot be happening,
she thought. But no matter how close she looked, the corpse was still real. A hoof touched Twilight's shoulder, and she turned away from the corpse. Twilight? Applejack said, looking at her with concern. Twilight pointed at the corpse.
He's not supposed to be here,
she cried. Applejack pulled her into an embrace. It's okay, Twi. It's okay. At first, Twilight stiffened, but after a moment she relaxed and leaned her head against the firm plate of armor covering Applejack's shoulder.
He's dead,
she murmured. She looked over at where Fluttershy tended to the survivor.
But what matters is the living,
she told herself. Eyes aglow, Fluttershy tapped her patient's chest. He coughed, launching green slime up into the air, then rolled onto his side, curling into a ball as he coughed and gasped.
You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay,
Fluttershy said softly. Where am I? He gasped.
You're safe,
Rainbow said.
You're gonna be just fine.
Out of the dozens of pods, only 3 ponies were alive. They looked gaunt and drained. Bags hung beneath their eyes. While the others gave them food and water, Twilight stood off to the side with Fluttershy.
How'd you bring them back?
She whispered.
Well, they were cursed, and I fixed it,
Fluttershy murmured. Twilight blinked.
They were...
She said out loud, but Fluttershy stopped her with a look.
Cursed?
She finished with an incredulous whisper. Fluttershy nodded.
I'm not sure what the curse did, but I was able to at least fix it.
Twilight made a mental note to prepare a wizard spell she knew with a similar effect.
He looks familiar,
she whispered, eyeing the stallion, the first one they had rescued.
He's Cadence's butler, isn't he?
Fluttershy nodded again.
I remember you.
one of the survivors said while Rarity gave her some water.
It must have been a dream I was having in there.
She gestured over her shoulder at the green pillar.
But I poured you soup. I was me, but not me.
Twilight furrowed her brows and looked down.
How can ponies be in two places at once?
She asked no pony in particular.
That's easy, Twilight,
Pinky said, appearing beside her.
There's only one real one.
Twilight looked up and quirked a brow at Pinky.
Illusions?
Pinky shrugged and smiled, then trotted forward to give one of the survivors an apple. Twilight shook her head in amusement as Pinky walked away.
No. Illusions wouldn't make sense. These are too real,
she murmured to herself.
A curse. Two places at once.
She tapped her hoof on the stone.
Spike, are you there?
She thought. Spike appeared in a flash of green flame. He yawned and stretched.
Yeah, I'm up. Why do you have to do things so early?
Behind him, the survivors shuffled away from the fading green light.
It's at least 2 in the afternoon, Spike,
Twilight said. Spike rubbed his eyes and looked around the room. He instantly latched onto Twilight's leg.
Where is this? Is it safe here?
He asked, panicked.
As far as I can tell,
Twilight said. She affectionately rubbed Spike's head with her free forehoof. She remembered him coming up just past her elbow, but his head was almost at her shoulder.
Did he grow?
She wondered.
Does the Celestial Library have anything on a shapeshifter that curses its victims?
Spike pulled away and coughed up a book. He caught it and passed it to Twilight. She read the cover and blinked.
Demonic Lexicon, Volume 4,
she said.
Know your enemy. Spike, are you sure this is the right book?
He shrugged.
It's what your request turned up.
Twilight frowned and cracked the book open.
Nabasu, Quasit,
she read as she flipped through the pages, looking for relevant information. A sketch covering half a page with a tower of pawns drew her attention. Beside the tower, 2 fanged insect-winged creatures roughly the same size as a pony stood guard. The book called them changelings. She read the page as quickly as she could. They need some fresh air, Applejack said, gesturing toward the survivors. Twilight finished off the last paragraph before looking away from the book.
How are they, other than that? Can they walk?
They're fine, despite being stuck in those pods for Celestia knows how long, Applejack said. They shouldn't be able to walk, but they can.
Spike, could you write a message for me?
Twilight asked.
Sure thing,
Spike said, producing a scroll and a quill.
To Cadence and Shining Armor. 3 of your servants are demons,
Twilight dictated.
They are shapeshifters that replaced your real servants some time ago. My friends and I rescued their victims. I have reason to believe the shapeshifters have already reverted back to their true forms, but they might still be lurking. While dangerous, they are not all that strong. Shining Armor should be able to handle it. The Iron Circle was involved. Sincerely, Twilight Sparkle.
Applejack chewed on her lip. Shapeshifters, huh? Makes sense. I knew there was an explanation. Spike passed the scroll to Twilight. She gave it a quick once-over before rolling it up and stepping forward. She approached the butler.
Are you loyal to Cadence?
She asked. The gaunt stallion, a unicorn, looked up at her. Of course. I serve her household and her mother's before her. Twilight pointed at the stairs with a hoof.
There's the way out. We're beneath the intersection of 10th and 43rd.
She passed him the scroll.
It is vital to Cadence's safety that you get this to her or Shining Armor as soon as possible.
She floated over a collection of bits.
In case something comes up,
she explained when she saw the questioning look in his eyes. He nodded. I'll get this to her as soon as possible. He started to pick himself up, and Twilight lifted him to his feet. Beside her, Rarity and Pinky helped the other two survivors up. The three ponies walked away and ascended the stairs.
Shouldn't we be bringing Cadence that message ourselves?
Applejack asked as they left. Twilight slowly turned, looking around at the station.
No. We are going after the pod that was removed,
she said.
That brick wall we came through was old, and that merchant didn't seem to remember anyone else coming down here.
She appeared at the walls.
There has to be another way in and out. I might be able to find it,
Rarity said. She focused, and a blue glow blossomed from her horn. Motes of blue light flowed down her forelegs and spiderwebbed across the floor, radiating ever outward. She opened her eyes and watched them etch lines in the floor.
So we're just going to leave Cadence to fend for herself while we chase after some pony in a green coffin?
Rainbow protested.
Cadence will be fine. She has shining armor. Whoever's in the missing pod must be important, and they could still be alive. But if we don't go after them, then they are as good as dead,
Twilight said.
Fine. I'll go make sure Cadence is okay while the rest of you figure out where that pod went,
Rainbow said as she turned toward the steps. Pinky blocked her path.
You don't split the party, Rainbow,
Pinky said, shaking her head in disappointment.
But you and Rarity,
Rainbow began to interject.
That was special,
Pinky interrupted.
And me, Twilight, and Fluttershy.
Pinky pressed a hoof against Rainbow's lips.
I think the point Pinky's trying to make is that we should stick together,
Applejack said.
We don't know what's down here, where we're going, or when we'll have the chance to regroup.
Pinky nodded emphatically.
And Twilight's right. Cadence will be fine,
Applejack added.
All right, fine,
Rainbow grumbled as she turned away from the stairs.
You win.
If that's all quite finished, there are 3 doors,
Rarity said, pointing. Twilight followed her hoof. Rarity's spell held illuminated outlines around 2 narrow steel doors set into shadowed alcoves and etched a gluing blow rectangle into one of the walls.
And only one big enough,
Twilight said, flicking her head towards the rectangular outline. She made her way toward it, balancing on a slab of rubble to cross to the other platform. She was pretty sure she was walking on the remains of a footbridge that had once arched across the tracks. When she got closer, she could see gaps in the mortar around the edge of the rectangle. Seeing no mechanism to open the hidden passage, she focused on the fake wall, reaching out to it with her magic. Pinky touched a hoof to her shoulder.
Trap,
she said. Twilight immediately withdrew her magic.
I don't see anything,
Rarity said, inspecting the wall.
Where is it? An itchy left ear means magic trap,
Pinky said.
It's a new one.
Twilight sat down and buried her face in her hooves.
Oh, not this again. My ear itched before we opened the vault, and it's itching now,
Pinky said.
I just figured it out.
She sucked in a deep breath before continuing.
It also itched when you stepped into the safe house, and when...
Twilight held up one of her hooves.
I get it.
That's some crazy intuition, Pinky,
Spike said from behind Twilight.
Yep, I call it my pinky sense,
Pinky said, beaming.
I know the future. This is just like the time back in Candlekeep when Twilight, I said I got it.
Twilight cut her off.
At least this time it's useful,
she muttered. She turned to Spike.
Aren't you supposed to go back to the celestial plane when things get dangerous?
Right, he nodded, then vanished.
I still don't see it,
Rarity said.
Well, then I guess we're doing this the hard way,
Applejack said.
Every pony find some cover.
She eyed the door and hefted Truthseeker. Twilight crouched behind a support column with Pinky. She peeked out around the edge. Applejack stood a good distance from the highlighted wall section. "Every pony ready?" Applejack called.
Ready?
Twilight answered, the voices of her friends joining her.
Now, if a demon jumps at me, y'all better kill it,
Applejack said.
I'm betting it's some sort of explosion,
Rainbow said from behind a piece of rubble.
I'm not,
Applejack said. Without hesitation, she turned and bucked her chain at the wall. Light flashed along the chain as Truthseeker homed in on its target. The moment Truthseeker connected, a detonation rattled Twilight's teeth. Flames blasted the wall apart. Before she could take cover, a loose chunk of rubble hit next to her face, missing her by a hair. By the time she was back behind the pillar, it was all over.
Applejack?
She called, barely hearing herself over the ringing in her ears. She stepped out from behind the column and peered through the dust kicked up by the blast. A moment passed. No response.
Applejack!
She shouted. A shape stirred, rising out of the rubble strewn across the floor. It shook off the dust and dragon scales gleamed in the light of Twilight's horn. Twilight rushed to Applejack, but Rainbow arrived first.
You okay, AJ?
Rainbow yelled as she landed. Applejack pointed at her ear and grinned.
Am I a tray?
She bellowed.
I can't hear a thing.
Twilight sighed in relief. Other than her ears, Applejack appeared to be unharmed.
I told you it would be an explosion,
Rainbow shouted, laughing. The false wall hid the entrance to a maintenance passage. Dried chunks of green ichor clung to the walls. Side by side with Pinky, Twilight made her way along the rigidly straight passage. It was just wide enough for a pod or two ponies. She kept the Solstice at the ready. Celestial Fury would be more unwieldy in the tight space.
So, what did the book say?
Applejack asked from the back of their formation.
Changelings are demons that serve the evil demigoddess of deception and lust, Chrysalis.
Twilight began.
They're solidly built in their true forms, with a tough carapace and sharp fangs, but they don't seem to use weapons or other tools effectively. They can fly, but they're slower than the average Pegasus, and shoot stunning bolts of green energy from their horns.
Twilight paused to hack off the end of a jutting, rusted pipe with Solstice, rather than risk scraping herself on it.
The true danger lies in their cursing bite and their ability to shapeshift. If they bite a victim and cocoon them like the ponies we saw, then they can nearly perfectly mimic their victim. It said something about borrowing the soul. I guess stealing might be a more accurate term. The main thing is, if they die, the victim in the cocoon dies too, unless the curse is removed.
She stopped at an intersection. To the left, she could see a collapse. A green smear marred the wall of the right passage, and so she took the path to the right.
They rely on subterfuge and avoid open engagement in their true forms. They can mimic pretty much any pony or creature of appropriate size to confuse their enemies, but without a cursed victim, it's only an illusion, and they lack behavior and memories of whoever they've copied.
So, Daisy was a changeling? The Daisy in the tower, I mean.
Rainbow said. Twilight nodded.
It seems like it. And so was the pony at the head of the table,
she thought.
Changelings were probably in control of the Iron Circle.
Rainbow sighed.
If killing the changeling kills the victim, then I still killed her.
No, you didn't. That changeling would have died in the fire rather than risk exposure. They don't have any sense of self-preservation. All that happens to them is they go back to the abyss,
Twilight explained.
Only certain weapons can kill them permanently, like Celestial Fury.
She wondered if splitting the head of the corpse with her sword had ended that changeling. She finally had a tangible answer. A what, if not a why? It was demons, not ponies of flesh and blood, that had placed a bounty on her head.
Why am I disappointed?
She wondered.
Did I want it to be ponies so that I could spill real blood when I took my revenge? I didn't get to them in time anyway. The Abyss?
Rarity asked.
I was under the impression most demons came from Tartarus. Most do,
Twilight said.
Changelings happen to come from the Abyss, the other part of hell, where their queen's realm lies.
She sighed.
It would take a powerful spellcaster to summon them. Maybe these gray wizards Cadence mentioned were behind them.
She frowned at her own conclusion. She felt like she was climbing a ladder without end. Her enemies were always another tier beyond, always lurking just around the corner, but never where she could reach them. She stomped her forehoof down on her next step in frustration.
Ah! Why can't anyone just fight out in the open?
She cried.
Why the proxies? Why the bounty hunters and demons?
Applejack chuckled. Well, based on our track record, they'd lose. Twilight snorted.
The Black Knight's a coward. He has to know where I am now. At least I can still kill him, if I ever find him,
she thought.
Well, not right now, but I know what you mean,
Rarity said.
We haven't exactly been subtle, what with those flyers getting everywhere.
Twilight spitefully cut a gash in the wall with Solstice's edge. Every step down the passage, 58 paces or so, she'd been counting. She hoped something would jump out at her just so she could kill it.
Ah! Come on! I know you're lurking down here!
She yelled.
Doesn't anyone want to come take a bite out of Twilight's sparkle?
Nothing came to meet her blade. "126 paces later, they had pushed down another false wall and emerged into a tramway tunnel. To the right, the tunnel descended and filled with murky water. To the left, she could see light and moving shadows around a bend. Smuggler's Way. Twilight flung Solstice at the wall, and the blade buried up to its hilt in the stone.
Ah! They could have gone anywhere!
She cried in frustration. She stepped forward to retrieve her sword and felt a hoof on her shoulder.
Relax, Twilight. Some pony must have seen something,
Rarity said. Twilight ripped Solstice free, spraying debris off its edge.
There are any number of exits along Smuggler's Way. Even if some pony did see them, how could they know where they left?
Rarity grinned at her.
You're underestimating the Thieves Guild. They know where you've been when you're down here. You're saying they follow ponies?
Twilight asked as she turned toward Smuggler's Way.
Ponies like you, anyway. Or ponies that happen to be carrying a large, egg-shaped green cocoon,
she said with a sly smile and trotted ahead down the passage.
We just need to find the watcher who saw them and pay the right price.
Twilight trotted after Rarity. She rounded a bend, and Smuggler's Way came into full view. Rarity pointed out a pony in a black cloak nestled into an alcove on the side of the tunnel. Twilight glimpsed a rough wooden door.
He's definitely with the guild,
she said. She opened the bag of holding.
Now come on, girls. You know the drill.